Salute, Wild Country updates and more. Back with another update for you guys. This is by Gizmodo. China, wiretaps Americans in worst hack in our nation's history? Let's go on and see what this article says, shall we? Hackers from the Chinese government were able to deeply penetrate U.S. telecommunications in ways that the administration hasn't yet acknowledged, according to new reports from the Washington Post and New York Times. The hackers were able to listen to phone calls and read text messages, reportedly exploiting the system U.S. authorities use to wiretap Americans in criminal cases. The worst part, the networks are still compromised, and it may take incredibly drastic measures to boot them from U.S. systems. Then it goes on to say the hackers behind the infiltration of U.S. telecom infrastructures are known to Western intelligence agencies as Salt Typhoon. And this particular breach of U.S. equipment was first reported in early October by the Wall Street Journal, but Senator Mark Warner, a Democrat from Virginia, spoke with the Washington Post and New York Times this week to warn the public that this is so much worse than we initially thought, dubbing it the worst telecom hack in our nation's history. And those articles, based on Warner's warnings, were published late Thursday. Warner is chairman of the U.S. Senate Intelligence Committee and a former venture capitalist who bet big on telecom in the 1980s and 90s, making him uniquely qualified to talk about threats to U.S. communications infrastructure. And he says it's really bad. My hair's on fire, Warner told the Post. Well, if your hair is on fire, you should have said something a lot sooner if this happened in early October, right? Am I wrong? And why wasn't the administration notified? Why did the New York Times and why did these other mainstream media know about it first? How did they know about it before any of the administration? Regardless if the administration is terrible or not, they should have been left known first. And then let the public know, well, actually, we should have been left known first. And then the administration, so they can find out what they can do to stop this stuff or fix it, if there's a way to fix it. Hackers weren't able to monitor or intercept anything encrypted. Well, how did they know that? According to the Times, which means the conversations over apps like Signal and Apple iMessage were probably protected, but end-to-end encryption over text between Apple devices and Android devices, for instance, aren't encrypted in the same way, meaning they were vulnerable to interception by Salt Typhoon, according to the Times. Warner told the Post that the infiltration wasn't directly related to the U.S., what they just had, the elections on November 5th, noting the hackers breached the system months earlier, in some cases more than a year ago. So if this happened a year ago, why is it just coming out now? Thought Though that logic is a bit confusing. If you wanted to hack a system and be prepared to gather intelligence for the election, you'd naturally want to do that well before the election, a spokesperson for Warner clarified through email Friday morning that the senator was saying this was what Snowden warned us about a years back, that were their effort as opposed to an effort to influence the election. As for the targets, the Post reports fewer than 150 people have been identified as having their text messages or phone calls monitored, and the FBI has been in contact with them. Most of the people are in the Washington, D.C. area, which makes sense if the hackers were interested in political targets. But 150 people can communicate with a lot of people, even in a short period. So the number of targets could be in the millions, according to Warner. You get the sense U.S. authorities have no real idea how many people have been impacted given the scope of the intrusion. The details about the hackers were able to push so deeply into U.S. systems are still scarce, but it has something to do with the ways in which U.S. authorities wiretap suspects in this country with a court order. The modern of phone calls, the monitoring of phone calls wasn't 24/7 according to Warner, but he didn't seem to elaborate on what that meant to the Times. Then it goes on to say from the Times, investigators believe that so far the hackers lacked the ability to go back into records, so they gained access to and listen to past calls, but they could gather metadata about previous calls, the phone numbers called, the length of the calls, and perhaps the rough location of the cell phone involved. Even if they did not listen to many calls, the metadata and geolocation data the Chinese have gathered of important American officials are alarming. All the major U.S. carriers, including AT&T, Verizon, and T-Mobile, were impacted, according to the Post. Incredibly, Warner says the hackers are still inside the U.S. system, and there's no obvious way to get them out that doesn't involve physically replacing old equipment, according to Warner. Now, if you want to read the rest of the article, I will leave the link to this article in the description down below. So if you guys could push on the description button, and there will be a link to the rest of this article. Guys, stay prepared, head on a swivel, and until next time, peace out.